Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or good evening, or whatever, depending on what part of the world you're in. And thank you so much for joining us today for this virtual roundtable, the Fireside Chat with our ACUHO-I leadership. My name is Lori Sabata, and I will be serving as your technical producer for the webinar today. And as my first official duty as technical producer, I'd like to make sure that everyone in our listening audience is able to hear the broadcast, and they should be seeing my title screen, which is a purple slide with the title on it, Fireside Chat with ACUHO-I Leadership. If you can say yes to both of those things, I want to direct your attention to your control panel, which could be located at different parts of your screen. Mine happens to be on the bottom. On the ribbon there, you'll find a, looks like sort of a hand, like a cartoon hand, if you wouldn't mind just hitting that. And that lets me know that all is well on your end, and I'm seeing lots of raised hands, so thank you so much for doing that. So having the technical check out of the way, wanted to mention also that online and presenting today is our ACUHO-I President, Von Stange, and also our ACUHO-I CEO, Mary De Niro, and I'll be turning it over to both of them in just a little while to get started for today. But first, I want to spend just a couple of minutes. I know we have 45 minutes together today, so I don't want to spend too much time talking, but I want to spend just a couple of minutes going over some housekeeping items. I know a lot of us are pretty familiar with webinar and Zoom format these days, but we do have our audience on a listen-only mode. So that means that when it comes time for questions and answers, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to once again look at your control panel, and you'll find your Q&A box there. That's where you will submit your questions. So we're going to start with, we're going through some opening remarks. There will be time to ask questions at the end, so that's how we'll be doing it, using that Q&A box. So you don't have to wait until the end either to type in your questions. If you think of something as we're going along, just go ahead and type those right in, and I'll be moderating and monitoring that as they come in. And then when we get to the end and it's time for questions, I'll be happy to go and read those out. And if you would just enter your name and institution and then enter your question and comment, I can go ahead and read those out, and Mary and Von will take some time to address any questions that you have. If at any time during the presentation you have any technical issues, like seems like the slides aren't advancing or we're having some audio issues, please go ahead and use your chat box, or you can also use the Q&A box to send those directly to me, and I will try to assist you with any issues that you may be having. I wanted to mention also that we'll be recording this webinar today, so we will have that available later for any colleagues who may have missed it. So I am going to, with that, waste no time and turn it right over to Von. Welcome, Von.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you all for being part of today's Fireside Chat. It's about 40 degrees in Iowa, so actually being by a fireside would actually be kind of nice right now, but I'm here in my office talking with all of you. So what I want to do today is talk about the highlights from the all-member survey that many of you recently completed. And then also some consolidated results from 3 straw polls that we sent out to the membership to talk about essential services in light of COVID-19. So, and also we also want to close with before some questions, close about some essential services that we are going to provide, we have and will continue to provide all of you, so that you might find helpful as you're moving forward and navigating current COVID-19 situation. So after that, we're going to do some Q&A. We've got to save some time for Q&A. So hopefully we're going to have plenty of time. So as we go through the slides, we're going to work through those as quickly but thoroughly as possible. So let me start with the all-member survey on the next screen. This was administered to everybody in the ACUHO-I database. As you look at the screen, we had over 24,000 individuals that we sent the survey to. They're members, non-members, past members, never members. And the results came back from 2,125 respondents, which was 9%. And we tried to get 2 different types of responses. We had institutional responses, and we also had individual responses. So the senior housing officers were the group that went through responded as the institution, and the individuals went through and responded as individuals, professionals as well. And we end up with 4 different areas that we want to talk about: environmental scan, goals analysis, association strategic, role assessment, and alternative assessment, to try to figure out what does that mean. Well, we're talking about the environmental scan is basically what changes are going to impact our profession over the course of the next 3 years, which is the term of our strategic plan from 2021 through 2023. The goals analysis is what goals are most critical for our stakeholders during this time. The association's strategic roles assessment is what ACUHO-I roles are most essential to our volunteer needs. And then finally, the alternative assessment is what alternatives exist in the market that impact stakeholder decisions and needs. So on the next few slides, I'm going to review a sampling of some of those findings in each of those areas that we hope that you're going to find are of particular interest. So first was the environmental scan. We really want to focus on the challenges and issues that are impacting our campus housing and residence life over the next few years. And remember when this survey went out, it was done in January and coronavirus was around, but is primarily in China and did not reach the borders of the United States yet. So you won't see a lot of that information in here when we're thinking about, we're talking about that topic. So we gave the respondents 41 factors. And of those, as we'll see on the next page, that the student mental health is the one area that is going to be of most particular significant impact on our operation. And you look at the responses, and we're able to click all that apply. So student mental health was clicked by 89% of the population, cost of university college attendance 85%, staff mental health 69%. Those are the top three, and that's not, I don't think any of those numbers are surprising to you all, but I think that this kind of confirms what we already know. We know that student mental health is a big issue to us. We know that the cost of attendance is really important to us, and staff mental health was another one that we're concerned about as well, because we've been talking about that with the ACUHO-I. What is the role of the live-in staff? What are the role of the RAs and things like that? So those are going to be important to us over time. We're going to break these down in the next slide by institutional responses and individual responses. Remember that SHOs, we're looking at the federal resident of an institution, and then everyone else through individual. You'll see that in most cases, again, regardless of whether it was institutional or individual, student mental health and cost of college and university attendance were the top two. And the third was for our individual response was staff mental health. However, for our institutional, we looked at more, some of the high points were also deferred maintenance and declining student enrollment and occupancy. Obviously, 35,000 foot level type things that the universities need to worry about as far as occupancy and staying financially solvent. So we want to make sure that you knew all of that. The individual response noted that work-life balance challenges, adapted facilities to be more inclusive, and retention of professionals in residence life were a more significant concern compared to their institutional responses. So some areas that obviously we saw that that institutions felt was more important. In some cases, we found that the individuals felt that those factors were more important. So I want to move on to goals. When we evaluate goals, we're really trying to get the question of what are the institutions and housing professionals' desired goals during the next 3-year period. Again, we separated them by institutional responses and individual responses. So on the next page, you're going to find our top 10 that we looked at. And you'll see that lots of different colors and boxes. There are lots of similarities and differences within these. In fact, the similarities at 6 of the 10 are similar, but 4 of them are also different. And so now they may be on a different landing spot in that top 10 than between the institution and the individual. But the similarities that we're finding that we wanted to provide a safe and inclusive environment. That was a top 3 goal for all respondents. While individual response were more likely to select leadership skills, management skills, next step path, management skills. Those are the type of things that were individual type of getting them to the next level of their professional experience. Whereas the institutions are looking more like managing our facilities, improving cultural competence, strategically assessing the need for and use of facilities, and then the department's financial performance. Again, things that worry about the finances and the big picture pieces. So those were what we looked at, or that's how they responded, with a lot of similarities, but some significant differences between the individuals and the institution. Next, we want to talk about the association roles assessment, and that's really to talk about what roles are the most important to you all. And what you're going to find is that we gave a number of different areas in this, and there are 6 potential strategic roles in the next slide that you're going to see. They're both institutional and individual responses. And so we're looking at the areas of education resources, which is dissemination and communication of our existing knowledge, our business operations support, which is education resources on human resources, marketing, fiscal, control, summer conference housing, all the areas that we look at the fall conference series, a lot of things that you'll see there. Advocacy, which is influential leadership and the advancement of the profession. Community and collaboration, which is the facilitation of individual and institutional connections. Research and knowledge development, which is the creation, discovery of new knowledge. And high value offerings, which are discounts on key services and a portfolio of products and services at different price points. So as you can see how these 6 possible strategic roles, both the institutional and individual respondents ranked provision of services or provision of education resources as the most important ACUHO-I role. Whereas the institutions tend to look at business operations and the high value offerings as more important than the institutions or than the individuals seem to place a higher value on advocacy and community and collaboration versus the institution. Not surprising, because I think with the organization and the way that we answer questions in the community and perhaps some generational differences, that wouldn't be surprising to me. The last one is alternatives assessment. Finally, alternative assessment are helping us to better understand what resources we can provide and what organizations best meet those needs. So we gave a number of different questions and issue areas that were out there, and then what are the resources that are available to our membership. So we know they go different areas for different things, and our hope was to be able to assess where they go for those resources. And so we wanted to ask them to consider the issue areas on the left and to determine where they got those resources on the right. And so what you're going to find is not surprising to me, but the magnitude of the difference is going to be pretty significant. On the next slide, you're going to see kind of a heat map of where you see where they're getting their information. You can see that ACUHO-I is a go-to source for 10 out of the 12 issues that were tested. ACUHO-I's strongest performance relative to alternative organizations in the area of advocacy, in industry research and data, and professional development and residence life. So the only issues where ACUHO-I is not the go-to source is finding job opportunities, which another source was higher than identifying recruiting talent, and the go-to source there was NASPA. So as we look at that, I think that they still use ACUHO-I for job opportunities and identifying recruiting talent. As you know, that TPE is one of those sites, and we have a partnership with NASPA in there. So that may be an area that they're looking at NASPA, when in fact that we have a pretty significant role in that as well. So you can look at the patterns where you all go to ACUHO-I for most things that are going on, which makes us very happy because we have a lot of resources available and we know that you're being able to utilize those. So next I'm going to turn it over to Mary, who's going to talk about a different kind of assessment, the stuff that talks about, that responds to COVID-19 questions. So Mary, it's all yours.
Thanks, Vaughn. You know, in 2015, when we created the strategic plan, one of the gaps that the board of directors and others felt was in the area of research. And since that time, we have research grants, we have funded research with NESE, and more recently, we have begun to do straw polls. We started the straw polls with FLSA, you might remember, and that was very valuable to our campuses. Since COVID-19, we have been administering polls each week. We have administered 3 thus far. The 4th one will be coming out to you, and we certainly thank everybody who has participated in these polls, because it really has provided great fodder for our members to be able to go to their chancellors, their presidents, their VPs, and demonstrate best practices, new ideas, and certainly prevailing trends. So as I mentioned, we've done 3 of these straw polls. To date, we've captured about 25% of all US campuses that offer housing. We have tried to ask questions that are of the most importance to you at the time we are filling the survey. So the questions have not remained static over the 3 weeks, but rather, as you can see, the effects of revenue shortfalls from refunds, something we're all talking about. HR issues, everything from furloughs, free hiring freezes, how we're thinking about undergrad compensation, the hospital surge, personal property retrieval, and some of the summer conferences are some of the main items that we have been surveying our members about. So let's take a look at some of those questions and let's get into the meat of it. So, an issue of critical concern for certainly our housing professionals, but really the academy in general, is whether campuses are giving refunds for housing and dining. And so the left graph, as you can see, 73% are giving either a partial or full refund. And that's simply because of the stay home, stay in place, not having large gatherings together. Certainly, it is a decision that, when possible, I think universities are finding that it's the right decision to do. But we also understand that for many universities, they're holding off, and you can see 24% have not yet made the decision, whereas 3% have said that they are not giving refunds for housing. The right top graph suggests that 28% of the campuses that responded that they would have revenue loss, and that's between 11 and 20% in this fiscal year. And an additional 36% of campuses responded that the revenues would be down between 21 and 35%. I would say that as we continue to move on this, we're going to see those numbers shift as not only we look at housing, but as we look at some other areas that are tangential to housing. And the bottom right graph shows what SHOs believe will be the operational impact from these housing revenue losses. So, delaying revenue or renovation projects, delaying preventative maintenance, delaying new construction, and certainly losing staff positions are some of the key items. As I mentioned, we also asked about dining refunds, dining closure. And you can see in this left circle that 72% are offering partial or full refunds, and that 3%, safe to probably assume, same 3% that are not offering housing refunds, and then 25% have not made decisions. The right circle, you can see that while the majority of campuses indicate that the dining facilities were closed, the majority, 68%, allowed exceptions for students that remained on campus. And so 15% closed completely, 17% still hadn't made a decision at the time of this straw poll. And we also know that certainly campuses are making sure that the students who need to remain on campus have what they need so that they can be successful throughout the rest of the quarter or the semester. One of the interesting things that has been coming up, and I say interesting as I sit here in 1445 Summit Street in Columbus, but for those of you on campus, you are seeing that our facilities are now being repurposed. And certainly in the news, we've heard a lot about campuses that are considering the option of offering alternative care facilities to their communities. This is for hospital surge, it might be for medical personnel or other people who can't go back to their homes because perhaps they've been exposed to the virus or they need to be closer to a hospital facility. The left circle suggests that about half, 51%, of campuses reported exploring campus housing as an alternative care facility. And so that's the blue and, excuse me, yes. So this, of course, is made possible now because the facilities are empty. And, I think one of the interesting things will be as we move forward is how do communities and campuses now think about compensating universities for some of this? What do the MOUs look like, et cetera? Our estimate based on the last straw poll is that nearly 10% of residents still remain on campus overall. And from an individual campus perspective, this number fluctuates between 0, where there is no students on campus, to 85%, where about 85% still remain on campus. This reflects the fact that campuses have made different decisions about what to do. It may also be an illustration of the state and regional differences and the campuses serving the different types of populations. So again, each campus is unique, and we know that our professionals are making the right decision for their student populations. Two other areas of particular interest is the impact of the COVID-19 on issues related to personnel, and that's such as hiring, summer activity, and other things. So, the left graph suggests that while nearly 60% of campuses reported having some kind of hiring freeze, so that's the blue and the gray, we know from our second straw poll that just 4% of the campuses reported laying off any staff as a result of COVID-19. Again, that may shift, but at this point in time, that's where it is. We're currently in the process of building our fourth straw poll, which will go live on 4/20, so that's next Monday. And if you have any topics that you would like to have us put into that straw poll, if you could just send them to me or send them to research@ACUHO-I.org, we'll make sure that they get into that poll. You can see the summer activities on the right. 51% have canceled some or all. 17% have canceled all of them, and 32% of the time of the straw poll had not canceled any. So those are some of the highlights from our straw poll. And again, I would just say that if anybody has any data that they would like us to collect, these polls are created weekly based on the topics that we're seeing from the online community, reading in the education press, and of course, talking to you, our members. Vaughn, I think you're muted.
Thank you. So thanks, Mary. I just wanted to interject that this fourth straw poll is coming out is very important to us in the association. We really do want to find out the specific financial impact on institutions as we look at the refunds given for housing, the refunds given for dining, the refunds given for summer camps and conferences. That number looms large, and we really need to advocate for some type of perhaps federal assistance, because those organizations that are auxiliary units, or if they're not, are going to take significant impacts. That may impact then travel, it may impact professional development, and it may impact the ability to do projects and deferred maintenance and things like that. So our fourth poll, we want to talk specifically to understand the exact dollar amount that our membership is refunding students, so that we can give that to people in order to say, here's what we've done to try to make our students and families whole, because we know they're struggling during this time as well. And this data is going to help us a lot as we determine how to be able to advocate for any type of stimulus dollars that may help higher education and campus housing in particular. So if you're an SHO on the call, I would love to have 100% response rate on this. I don't know if that's possible, but the more data that we get, the larger that number will be and the bigger the impact it will be. So when that straw poll is out next Monday, SHOs, please complete that poll, because you're going to have, it's going to have a significant impact on how we move forward and how we can advocate for the housing operations particularly within the United States, but perhaps throughout the world as well.
Thanks, Vaughn. I just quickly want to share how some universities are using these straw polls. and others are relying on the information that you're providing. So as you know, student spending is a critical input into the calculations that the U.S. government uses for the gross domestic product. Given the massive move out in March, research at the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, they've reached out to ACUHO-I to use the straw poll data to revise their modeling and calculating GDP. So that's pretty cool that our information is being used at the federal level. Certainly, information has been sent to chancellors, and in this particular case, it was to see if they can understand better the arrangements that universities were getting into for the hospital surge. And then for those of you who read the Chronicle of Higher Education, you'll know that our straw polls have recently been quoted in their financial data reports on housing and dining fee refunds. You know, these straw polls are free to everybody, but I would especially like to thank our members who help us support this and the foundation who help support the research. You can find these on the COVID-19 research page, along with a variety of documents, including the CDC guidelines, aggregated information from our government relations consultant, and resources from our sister associations. I'd also like to point out that we've been offering 3 to 4 virtual roundtables each week. These roundtables touch on important issues, and again, we try to make them in real time. So if you have issues that you would like us to discuss, just let us know. I will point out that the 3 coming up this week, we have one on summer conferences, the one on 4/16. That is not a mistake. It is at 3 a.m. And I would like to thank the ACUHO-I staff that will be up to help facilitate that. But that's the time when it is most convenient for many of our members who are not located in the continental United States. And then on 4/16, supporting graduate students. And that is a panel made up of higher ed faculty. So we hope that you will join us on that. You know, and I think with that, I think we want to turn it over to questions that you all might have. And Lori, if you don't mind, I think I'll just start with probably the big question that's on everybody's mind. And that is, what is going to happen with the ACUHO-I Conference and Expo, ACE? And you know, for those of you who have been in contact with me, who have written me, who called me, who texted me, first of all, thank you. I appreciate connecting with you and hearing how you're doing and the innovations that you're doing on your campus. My first concern is the safety of our members, our industry partners, our staff. And so we are not going to do anything that puts any of those important stakeholders at risk. At the same time, we're monitoring the situation. As you know, we still have about 2.5 months to go before ACE would kick off in Portland, Oregon. So we're just asking that you stay with us a bit. You know, this is a time when we want to do what's right for both our members and our industry partners, as I said, and the staff, but we also want to do what's right as far as contracts that we have, et cetera, with the Oregon Convention Center and hotels. And so, you know, when we have it figured out, you all will be the first to know. We really appreciate your patience and more to follow. Thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Lori.
All right, thank you, Mary. I do have a couple questions. So I'd like to start off with a question about the housing internship program. So does ACUHO-I have any guidance on the housing internship program this summer for hosts and for interns?
I go ahead and take that, Mary, then you can fill in. Our relationship between with ACUHO-I and the internships, or with the institutions and the interns themselves, our goal is to be able to be the conduit by which they can make those decisions. But ultimately, we're not giving people any information saying you should or you shouldn't. I think that each institution is making their own individual decisions regarding whether or not that they can give their intern a good experience. And so I know some campuses have rescinded some of those. I know that we've done it on our own campus because it was really the person was going to be working summer conferences, and in reality, our summer conference program has been at the best cut short. So we didn't feel like they could get a good experience. So we have done that as rescinded that experience. I know that others have as well. So I think it's really up to each institution as far as travel policies and the type of experience they're going to get to give them the best experience. But that's we're leaving it to each individual institution's decision in order to do that, and the individual interns themselves, if that becomes problematic for them.
Thanks, Vaughn. I'm going to move on to the next question. So thank you for sharing all of that good data from the all-member survey. So from your perspective as president, was there a finding that really stood out to you as being particularly important for your understanding of what is valuable to members?
I think that I wasn't a lot surprised by what we saw. I think that's from a mental health standpoint, those seem to be important. And we see them every day as I read through the log of incident reports. I mean, I see suicidal ideations multiple times during the week where they're talking with RA. So we know that mental health is going to be an issue. I think that because these results were not COVID related, I'm curious to see how that may change a little bit with that. I know I've been getting calls from students who said, I'm not sure I can be safe in the residence halls in the era of COVID. So will that change how I can contract with the residence halls and things like that? So I know that's going to come up more recently since the data. But I'm appreciative of all the resources that ACUHO-I has, because I think they've done a good job of being able to provide for our membership very well in a variety of areas. That one didn't surprise me, but the magnitude of what it was really surprised me, because we know that members have other resources, whether it be through NASPA or ACPA or other organizations as well. So the fact that ACUHO-I is the authoritative source for in so many areas was really heartening to me.
Great.
Can I add one more thing? Is that
sure.
The data that we have is very high level right now, and we've been responding to obviously COVID like everyone else has. So we'd love to be able to parse this out a little bit more. I think how this breaks down by public versus private, large versus small, I think there's opportunities in order to see that information a little bit more. And that's something that I hope that we're going to be able to dig in soon, because I think the needs and ideas of some of those smaller institutions versus some larger institutions may be very valuable to us, and also may help inform our small college leadership that has to work within the constraints of smaller budgets and things like that. So are the issues out there similar or different? And I see how they might be similar or different than some of the large campuses or the public campuses.
Thanks, Fawn. So with respect to the straw polls, I know, Mary, you mentioned specifically that we were going to be doing more straw polls and how and where to submit questions for those. But with respect specifically, are we planning on doing more surveying on the financial impact of what is happening on campus, and specifically the impact of refunds on institutional budgets?
Yeah, so that's that's a great question, and that was Vaughn's plea to everyone. Next week's straw poll is going to be asking SHOs or the person who fills out the survey on behalf of the campus housing department on your campus to peg a number on it. And we know that it is significant. If you are a flagship university, state flagship university, we know if you just do the calculations from what is published, we know that it's somewhere between probably 18 to 28, $30 million. But we would love to have those statistics. And so that is something that will be asked in the next survey, and be mindful of it. And as you're talking to colleagues, please ask them to also be mindful of that, because it really will allow us to have a sense, and then to think about how we share that information with Congress, how we share that information with others who may be able to help us soften that blow somewhat.
Great, thank you. And I see a few attendees have submitted some things in chat, possibly already for that next straw poll. So we'll take a look at those. Thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions, and we are kind of getting towards the end of our time together. So Mary and Vaughn, did you have any final comments you wanted to make before we close for today?
Lord, before we go, I think this question is for Vaughn. So I'm going to read it out, and I apologize if I misplace or if I say the university. But we have a guest from India. Welcome, welcome. And the question is, what implications will social distancing have in a room share and or dining, gyms, and reading rooms? So Vaughn, I'll let you take that question.
Can you reread the question, Mary? Because you cut out during part of it.
Apologies. So the question is, what implications will social distancing have in room sharing and or dining, gyms, and reading rooms?
Yeah, that is an excellent question, and thank you for asking it. I think that if you're on a college campus, you're probably doing some thinking about what you're going to be doing in the fall as far as having roommates and using restrooms and things like that. And I just talked about this with my facilities director earlier today, and I think that it is going to have an impact. I think that has made some people nervous about that, and it's going to be probably an increase in the number of requests for single rooms because they don't want to, they want to make sure they're social distancing. But I've also say that I don't know if that I'm going to make any radical changes based on something that may happen once every 100 years. I mean, this may be there for a while, but I think that in reality, I mean, we're comparing in the United States everything to the 1918 flu epidemic. And if this is a 2020 coronavirus, yeah, this may happen more often, but I don't know that I'm going to change the model of what we're doing from a facilities or from a structural standpoint because of that. But I think that hopefully people will take mind to things like social distancing. I think that somebody in the United States says they may never see another handshake again or something like that. So there are certainly some ways that we can change our behavior a little bit more within an areas of social distancing, but within a situation of roommates and things like that, I don't know that that's going to change radically, that we're going to build facilities so that everybody can have their own room. We've done that already with, I think that there was some turn as we turned the century that people started making more apartment style with their own bedrooms and things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. Certainly that will enhance social distancing, but I don't know that we necessarily going to radically change the model because of coronavirus. That's my opinion, so.
Thank you, Vaughn. And now I think we can go ahead and conclude. So if you had any, Mary or Vaughn, if you had any concluding remarks before we end for today.
Mary, do you want to start?
Sure, I will. You know, during these times, I think that it is more important than ever that ACUHO-I is paying attention to the needs that you all have and being the ear to the ground, as well as being that conduit to be able to help share best practices, leading impact practices, as well as doing the research that we are doing so that you have the hard data to bring to your presidents, chancellors, and provosts. And I would just say that if you have information, again, that you would like us to research on, we are trying to be very nimble and to act in real time. Let us know. Equally so, I think you will see that we will continue doing virtual roundtables, and hopefully not just on COVID-19. We have heard from our members that this is really an easy way for them to get information. And during this time when we're all self-isolating and staying in place, it's a great way to be able to connect with peers from around the world. So thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for your leadership on campus. I am quite sure that the move outs and the changes that have happened would not have happened as seamlessly if it was not for the leadership of campus housing professionals. So on behalf of everyone, thank you for all you're doing for our students.
Thanks, Mary. This has been a difficult time, I think, for all of us in the housing profession. I've been doing this for over 35 years, and I've weathered floods, tornadoes, active shooters, and a polar vortex. In all this time, I don't know that one thing has impacted me as much as the coronavirus has, not only professionally, but personally as well. The fact that you can't go anywhere, the fact that your relationships are at a distance, the fact that this is going to impact us financially and could impact us for years and years beyond that. And for some of those campuses as an auxiliary, yes, we have a reserve, we'll be able to weather that, although that in the long run, it's going to create necessity for us to perhaps raise rates in order to get our reserve back up so that we can do the renovation we need to do. For those smaller campuses that may not be auxiliaries, this could be really difficult to be able to weather because your university ends up needing that income in order to stay afloat. And so they're going to struggle, and they may also look at other operations in order to see how they can get some money. And this is going to be an opportunity for perhaps our off-campus partners to come in and try to save the day with some good financing and the ability to take over operations so that they can get infused some dollars. This is important why you all need to have a seat at the table and that you need to be well-versed in public-private partnerships, in finances, in facilities and things like that. So you're able to make the best decisions, or so that at least your university is going to be able to make the best decisions, and you can impact that by being a good guide and having expertise in those areas. I think that's going to be really important. The second thing is that from an ACUHO-I perspective, we have provided a lot of resources, and we've done a number of these straw polls and the webinars and things like that. And so your membership is important. And I think that when it gets to finances, people may be making decisions that say, well, what can we cut? My hope is that what isn't cut is membership in ACUHO-I, because I think that they provide a valuable resource and that you will get your money's worth by being able to do that. I recognize that there's a lot of things on the table that may be valuable to you, but my hope is that membership in ACUHO-I will not be one of those things that you cut, because I think that in the long run, you will benefit more than what you pay into those to what you're getting from ACUHO-I. So I just want to thank everybody for taking time today out of their busy schedule. Perhaps this is a 45-minute respite from talking about coronavirus, although we did actually talk about it today, but hopefully you get some insights out of this and take the information and use it as you see fit. Feel free to ask us some more questions offline if you're shy type and didn't want to ask the question, or something that you read through kind of makes you think that maybe I should ask this question. We'd be happy to answer them offline. But we want to thank you for your time today, and best wishes as you navigate through all this coronavirus and the impacts it may have for next year and what it has right now. So I appreciate everybody's dedication to the housing profession, and particularly to the students that you serve.
All right. Thank you, Vaughn and Mary, for sharing that information and being available to answer questions. And also want to thank everyone in the listening audience for joining us today. And I wish everyone stay safe and well and have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.